Very good afternoon, Excellency, former President Tarja Halonen, distinguished colleagues. I am saying distinguished colleagues because there is many distinguished colleagues this afternoon. Of course, I am starting from our youngest generation. I will come to it in a minute. Young students who actually had an interaction with our distinguished guest Tarja Halonen last week. But I would like to specifically recognize a number of guests this afternoon in this room. And I would like to start in the second row left from my position, looking first at the former director of EASA, Roger Levin. Roger, please, would you stand up? Because not... Now, Roger has been second director of EASA. He followed Howard Raifa, and he came here and he did many good things for EASA, including establishment of the Young Scientist Summer Program. This is where, Excellency, you were interacting with these fantastic fellows last Friday. It was in 1977. And Roger, for you, the visit of President Halonen started last Friday with a full afternoon of interaction with the YSSP 2016. We had two lectures about two former presidents, Halonen and Fischer from Austria. And I think fantastic contribution of the YSSP cohort to the debate. So that was actually a very nice tribute to the beginnings of the program which you started to at EASA. Thank you very much for that. Yet another distinguished EASA fellow from EASA Network is sitting next to Roger. Norm Reiter, please, Norm, would you stand up? Sometimes people ask me, explain to me, Professor Kabat, in 2 sentences, what does science diplomacy means? Then I say, Norm Reiter. Because he has been at the beginning of EASA science diplomacy type of discussions from the United States State Department. He was the first science advisor to Madeleine Albright, Secretary of State, and to Hillary Clinton. He's a EASA fellow in his heart and everything. He has been helping me and my predecessors to get EASA where it is now. So Norm, thank you very much and welcome again at EASA. Last but not least, in the room, yet another distinguished EASA fellow. He's sitting in the first row. You know him already. He has been here quite a lot of times, last 2 years. Jeffrey Sachs. Jeff, just for case. Working with us in many of the important agendas, including the one which we are debating also today, but last Friday even more, the Sustainable Development Goals, futures, and how we actually get to the reality of implementation based on the solid scientific substantiation. Of course, I would like to go on and to welcome more of distinguished of you, but let's stop here and let's introduce briefly this afternoon session. I was privileged to meet former President Halonen 3 years ago during the establishing meeting of EASA Albach Forum. We call it Think Tank Reflection Group, which, as you know, is a construct where we put together the brightest minds of the academia, formal governments, businesses, and civil society to discuss the real issues behind sustainable transformations. And I can say that the meeting which we had and the contribution which Tarja Halonen made to the deliberation was enormous. And of course we knew and we all appreciated her contribution not only to the European and global agenda when she was president of Finland for 12 years, but also her commitment and contribution to the global agenda of the United Nations. She has been serving and helping Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and others in putting together very important agendas in the implementation and setting the goals. She is still involved and committed in the current implementation stage. And when we met second time or third time, we had this, what we call in Albach, hike pencil. We were hiking to the mountain and thinking. And then I discovered that she was at Harvard sabbatical. She said, Professor Kabat, you know, it's good, but I was not really that happy. So I said, why did you come to EASA to do second sabbatical? Of course, saying this, hoping she would even reflect. She said, yes. So here we are. She is here with us for a short sabbatical, staying with us and having a very busy program. Not only lecturing, but also mentoring some of the YSSP students, talking about women in science, meeting diversity committee, doing a lot of relevant things at EASA. So Tarja Halonen, please welcome again. Welcome here among us, and floor is yours for presentation you're going to give this afternoon. Once more, join me in welcoming Excellency Tarja Halonen.
So I give the first warning. When I will speak, I just speak. And on Friday, those who heard me, they noticed that then I have some dias. Now I have not. You have to just try to listen. Okay, but dear Professor Pavel Kabat, nice to meet you again. The same, you with Geoffrey, fantastic, and all the others. Now, how many of you heard me on Friday? Wow, okay, that's it. So I hope that you get also something new today. So, of course, especially some of those who have not met me earlier, I want to say my really warm thanks for having been invited to give a lecture at such a prestigious institute like this is. And I know very well that JASA has a long history, and it is a wonderful example of international cooperation in the field of science and research and diplomacy. So really, I was a bit jealous, but anyway. So I know that you have here some of the best minds of our time working on very complex and urgent issues, and also that JASA is constantly educating a new generation of scientists and researchers to tackle the many problems of our planet and societies. So, if you could see, Geoffrey and some others, your back, so you could see that I have been already speaking to Young Scientist Summer Program last Friday together with President Fischer, and so many of us will get now and then repeat some of the ideas, but I hope that not too much. So the third point I want to say once again is that I'm very glad that the cooperation between Finland and JASA is active and productive. We will have a chance to meet with many research programs and teams here, including also with the Finnish students and scientists I will meet now during the week. And a particular and timely relevance are the Arctic issues in which JASA collaborates with the Finnish institutions. Finland is an Arctic country, as you know, and we consider the vast potential, but also the threats that Arctic nature faces being a key importance. So, involving and bringing policymakers, implementers, and the academic community together, that's what we need. And you heard me to say on Friday, release the scientist, and I repeat it. I do mean it because, as I said, science needs to be out there, and in fact, when the science community interacts this way with politicians, it is out there in a way. Similarly, the people need to hear what science has to offer and how you see the problems and solutions. And I didn't promise to you the easy life, but an interesting times and very, very important cooperation. The last point, what we had already a little bit touched on Friday, is that it's also important that the sustainability science is not just about natural sciences and economics, which is of course very important, but includes the disciplines of the social science and behavioral science. I know that JASA has also had project combining art with science, which is a very interesting and valuable, and we will meet the same combination also in Albach. The SDGs, they are clear, but how to implement them is difficult, and we need new ways to solve them. So, to some of you, the new thing, to many of you, the old thing, so a little bit about the history. So you remember that the world came together in New York last September, a year ago, to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals. And that was a moment of the celebration, a moment when enough political wisdom, will, and courage was shown, and I have tried to describe it because of my own experience when I met a young lady who was very active in these processes, to say to me that we were in August, and so she said that you see, I'm a little bit disappointed. We already know that we will get the SDGs. It's all these activities past. I said, that meeting, I said, it's like a wedding, so that very seldom you organize the weddings if you don't know that both the man and the woman will say yes. And then that's one thing where everybody's helping, and we as a family, we are present and so on. But that's one part. And so there will be a lot of challenges during the marriage, and that we saw also with the SDGs. In Paris, December was the first one. It was the climate summit in Paris, and we all made it. So that was a good start. But now we have to be helping that the marriage will be the lasting one and to get the good results. So now we are at the time of the implementation. And this will be also a real test of test of courage and political will for the leaders, but not only for them, it's also for us. So, what is the world where we are doing this? Which kind of the world is that? Pavel said that he has sometimes been asked also to describe with one word or one sentence and so on. I think that Jeffrey has also met the same challenge many times. So I have said normally this is the word of uncertainty. This feeling of uncertainty comes up in discussions everywhere with different kinds of the people. The persistence of the stark inequalities, the speed of technological innovation, and the lack of the trust among people are some of the key causes of this uncertainty. Extreme examples of the lack of trust are violent conflicts, but also, for example, I would say the hard opinions of many against refugees and immigrants here in Europe. So anyway, the world is not perfect, but that's why we have to work. And this is the world in which we live and in which we have to promote sustainable development. There is no time to wait for the wars and economic turbulence to end, that we could concentrate on building sustainable societies in peace. On the contrary, now we need to be act swiftly and with determination on all fronts. And you have been following, I think, the political discussion, so you know that people speak about the hybrid war system. Yeah, true, but so has to be also the peace movement to be. And in the matter of fact, it has been always a little bit like that. It's not only one war or one peace, but it's a hybrid. So then the next point what I would like to once again to tell that what is then different with the previous international agreements and SDGs. So being a Nordic, at least a former lawyer, of course I would love to see that everything is legally binding. But that has not happened during this millennium. Millennium goals were not, SDGs are not, but we have to try. And the political will seem to be more important, and that's good. So some of you, I think, that have been during this process within this. So any of you have been in any of these Rio summits? The first one, or the Rio plus 10 or Rio plus 20? Somebody? Yes. So we remember how fantastic the fight was and the battle. We thought that now finally we do it. Any of you has been in Davos? Jeffrey at least, yes. You could raise your hand. And some others too. Yeah, I have been also. So what about those who have been attending to Porto Alegre Social Summit? That's the real place, I mean. Yeah. Those who said that Davos is Russian and Rio is not too much, but Porto Alegre in Brazil was all those who want to be more radical in social politics were always gathering together. So when the MDGs were described as a global social justice commitment by the north to the assist to south. So many of the Porto Rico people, they were happy. That was the first step. So when we got on Rio +20, I think many environmental people were happy. And more and more Davos people too, perhaps. But now we have, of course, to see that what's now the different. Even the MDG was not legally binding. It succeeded pretty well. On the contrary, what many observers at the time of the adoption believed. For instance, the important goal of halving extreme poverty was achieved even ahead of time. But now SDG represents a broader integrated entity. I call it the modern trinity. Somebody would say that it's just too much Christian, but anyway, it's a modern trinity. Its economic growth is welcome and even needed, but it has to be growth with a substance that provides decent jobs and creates wealth that is distributed in more just way. But this economic growth also has to respect planetary boundaries and the health of our environment. So the narrow and split focus on GDP, environmental protection, social programs have been substituted by an understanding that they form an inseparable framework or one entity. Of course, not everywhere and all the time in the same way, but anyway, reminding you that they have always also influence to other sectors. The second point which is different is that SDG also concerns all countries. Again, one of my own memories is that when one Peruvian young lady said to me that when I heard first time the Millennium Goals, I thought that, wow, that's good. That's what the government has to give to me. But now when we have achieved the SDGs, I see that it's not only the government. In the matter of fact, it's a business sector, it's NGOs, it's me, myself. And this is a big difference. Every country has the duty and the right to implement sustainable development. Every nation needs to do its part domestically, and those better off will have to support the poorer countries. Many of the challenges we face do not know national borders, and so cooperation is, of course, vital. So we can come back on more on that how you choose which kind of the package you do, because countries can do that by themselves. But then whether they have succeeded, that's monitored internationally. The long so-called post-2015 negotiations were inclusive, multi-stakeholder, and transparent, and more difficult than earlier. And we try also to keep this inclusiveness, multi-stakeholders, and transparent system also with the implementation. In addition to governments and international organizations, the civil society and the private sector need to be involved. It's not only good, they need to be, because otherwise we don't make a success. Of course, the role of the governments is still going to be very important, particularly in ensuring a holistic approach. Governments also bear special responsibility, and they will be held accountable. The SDGs will also be monitored and measured more broadly and effectively than any internationally set goals before, and Jeffrey knows very much about that part too. So the global indicators, if I remember now correctly, 232 now. To measure progress have been defined, but how to get all the information needed is still open. I was a bit disappointed. So when some experts in Helsinki, we have the big seminar, they estimate that even in developed country like Finland, for instance, and we have a quite good statistical system, has data ready now available only for about 100 of the indicators at this stage. Of course, we are working to get the new ones, but I mean, it's not at all totally done. For the rest, new methods and data collections need to be developed. And I think Jeffrey, as from this network, knows very much about that, because the Sustainable Development Solution Network, which has, by the way, done wonderful work since 2012 to mobilize global scientific and technological expertise to promote practical problem solving for sustainable development, launched together with the Bertelsmann Stiftung in July, an SDG index and dashboard to provide a report card for tracking progress and ensuring accountability. And it's a great tool that will be very useful for all of us, and I hope that many of you become interested to work with that. So, dear friends, the ambitious 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development calls also, as we discussed on Friday, for breaking down silos and addressing the problems of development in a holistic and integrated manner. It emphasizes the linkages between the economic, social, and environmental aspects of development, but I think it's also part of the modern science more generally. So this, of course, requires us to think beyond the confines of our academic disciplines and institutional mandates and specialties in order to see how interrelated many of the world's problems are and the solutions too. And those who work every day with the universities, you know how easy it is to do. I mean, how easy it is to say to your colleague professor that, in a matter of fact, we would like to do this too, the same subject. But I think that modern time is better than it used to be. So because we have already the good results in this kind of the cooperation. Climate change is a great example. Too often we focus on the hard science aspects of it only, overlooking how it relates to many other facets of life, right down to such fundamental issues like human rights and gender equality. And I will speak, as it has been promised, more about this equality issue. So we must address the unequal distribution of power, resources, and opportunities that cause poverty and all manifestations of inequality, including gender inequality. We must tackle the deeply rooted social, cultural norms and practices that justify and overlook violence and discrimination against women and girls and their exclusion from decision-making processes. If I say that when I was in politics, I was not especially concerned to be a feminist. After I have retired, I have become step by step more and more, because that is the world. And I have seen with my own eyes, of course, a lot of these experiences, but coming from the Nordic country, not all. So the human rights of women continue to face backlash in many corners of the world. Fundamentalism against the rights of women, it threatens to take back gains even made during the years in hard negotiations, and dynamics at the UN have become more complex. The geopolitical bipolar system, which for decades shapes how countries' positions played out at the UN, has shifted towards a more multipolar struggle for power. And it's good size, but it's also bad size. More countries now assert their voices at decision-making tables on a range of issues. And pity to say, it seems to be so that human rights and social justice concerns seems to be less important to some countries. Especially so are the issues called, as they say, these are quite all right, but these are so controversial, these are taboos. And such kind, you already guess what I mean. These are sexual and reproductive health and rights, particularly when related to women's and young people's sexuality. When we want to get the human progress and development right, we cannot allow decision makers to pick up and choose which rights are convenient and to stand up for and which are too controversial. I spoke about this on Friday already, some parts, but I want to highlight it is a very important topic. Sexual and reproductive rights are cornerstones of gender equality and fundamental to the dignity and well-being of all people, but especially those who are now lacking it, women, adolescent girls, and young people more generally. They deal with the most basic aspects of our lives. As I always say, the right to make our own informed decisions about our bodies, health, sexuality, relationships, marriage, children. But many people, particularly women and adolescent girls, and especially those living in impoverished or marginalized communities, see their rights trampled and denied every day. Even the proposal, what we made in, and I mean many, we made to add so-called comprehensive sexuality education for young people. It was strongly opposed and finally not included. And so, I ask again and again, if people cannot decide for themselves over these very private, very personal matters, how can we expect them to be able to take broader responsibility for their communities and the environment? So, but it's only a question of dignity and rights of the individuals. The price of inaction weighs heavily, of course, on individuals, but also their families, societies, and economies. It drains people of their health, productivity, and full potential. It overwhelms health systems, decreases public funds, and robs countries of their human capital. All resources that they are needed to address development challenges, including poverty eradication, economic growth, combating climate change, and food security. So no action is not an answer. So, as it has been promised, let me continue to look some of the key issues on gender perspective. I have worked in many UN sectors, like Pavel already said, and also in Sendai process, which is about the disaster risk reduction. And it emphasizes the risk reduction as opposed to a narrow focus on disaster impacts. And this rethinking of how development can build resilience creates incentive for investments that bring multiply benefits. Not investing in disaster risk reduction now can, in a very strong way, impact sustainability in the long run. So the so-called Sendai framework identifies poor land management, unsustainable use of the natural resources, the declining ecosystems as underlying drivers of disaster risk that need to be tackled. If disaster risks are not reduced, then future losses will impact growth and development. The integration of disaster risk reduction in sustainable development and investment policies and practices, this is the core message of the Sendai framework. And then to the gender. This work both in the fields of Africa as well as in the meeting rooms of New York should involve more women. Due to existing socioeconomic conditions, institutional mechanisms, cultural and traditional beliefs and practices, women and girls are more likely to be affected by disasters, including increased loss of livelihoods, gender-based violence, and loss of life during and after disasters. I take only one example. The baby girl has, after such kind of the disaster, a risk which is 14 times bigger than the boys to die in the next 6 months. It's not because the baby girls are so fragile and sensitive, because they get then water, food, and care only if it's something left over from the boys. So simple. If you are interested, so this UN Disaster Risk Reduction Organization will give a lot of possibilities for you to continue your work. So the Sendai framework supports an all-inclusive approach to disaster risk reduction that recognizes women's key role in building social and economic resilience. We must empower women and ensure their equal participation in decision-making processes linked to disaster risk reduction, as well as equal accesses in simple information, education, opportunities, resources, and capacities. Some of the responses are very, very easy and simple to do. So the next example is in Paris Climate Agreement. Gender equality is now also a guiding principle there. And it has a considerable relevance for successful implementation of our climate goals. I think you all know that women are the most important producers and decision makers concerning household consumptions, for example, but and they count that in developed countries, women make some 80% of the family's daily purchasing decisions. So this is a lot of power. Women comprise the majority of the food producers, particularly in low-income countries where families rely on smallholder farms for food and income. And of course, we know then that improving efficiency and providing agricultural technology to women smallholders farmers is then the key step. But that's not enough. That's a good start, but women's right to own, inherit, and control land must be also legally protected. In the matter of fact, many of those women, they are not legally owners of the land. They just cultivate it. So I don't go to the other details, but I will say that this is a very, very important sector also concerning the food production and all this issue of well-being of the people in the future. We have already a lot of tools to work against gender discrimination, but we have to coordinate our efforts with UN Women, UNESCO, other UN agencies, member countries, NGOs, and other actors, all of you too. And I'm very happy that the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon wants to bridge this work to the future and to the work of the next Secretary General, and we, quite many of us, we are involved in this bridging work, if I put it that way. So, my last point is still the issue of the resources. I said on Friday that we have overused our limited natural resources, but we have been underusing the human potential. Already when we were preparing for the Rio+20 meeting in 2012, we all countries doing that, we agreed that especially women, young and the poor were not sufficiently on the international development agenda. Even, for instance, the younger generation in the most of the countries is the best educated. But they have difficulties to come and use it, as you might know already from your own experience. So when the sustainable development requires the usage of all available human resources and knowledge, we have to make a change. And the MDGs already, they put a focus on education, and it succeeded well. Now the SDGs strive to strengthen the quality of education and to put all children in primary and secondary schools. But it's by now self-evident that educating girls is particularly important so that they can also fulfill their individual potential and to become full productive members of societies. But we always speak about the young ones. But you see that we people, we happen to live longer, like you see also in this hall. And so we also need to provide lifelong learning opportunities for people as people live longer and change. We might have also experience between changing the professions and everybody needs a new technology in the society. So education is important for individuals, but also for entire societies. And so I repeat that educating children and youth is a good basement, but we have to keep also all people in this focus. So one perhaps encouraging example for you that what we can do. As I have mentioned, so I was co-chairing the Millennium Goals at UN 2000. And in that time, there was nothing concerning such kind of the word like work in the whole MDGs. So we made it with the World Commission on the Social Dimension of Globalization as late as 2004. So we put it afterwards to MDGs. Now, we have it already since the beginning. And I think that this is a very good step forward. Decent work is, and its four dimensions: employment creation, social protection, right at work, and social dialogue. And they are already the integral elements of the new agenda from the beginning. But I warn you, it's a very difficult goal. It's a very difficult goal. As the Secretary General of UN, Ban Ki-moon, has said, work is more than the source of income. It is a source of dignity. So the provision of decent jobs can also decrease the potential for conflicts and extremism, as unemployed, uneducated youth will be very easy targets for recruitment by extremist movements. So that's it, dear friends. The complexity and urgency to solve the big global challenges, we know it all. We know also that YASA is a leading institute for tackling these questions. You have a very big task, and so I hope all the best for you. And I think that the call for the transformation in all spheres of life, from production to consumption, requiring changes in technologies, values, behavior, and governance, that's a big task for you. And the new scientific approaches, they are really needed to better contribute to the implementation of the sustainable development. Sustainability science is spreading in universities across the world. You can be part of that. And it introduces a new approach to sustainability problems by approaching them from a holistic perspective and aiming to link knowledge with action. So don't be afraid of practical work. So this requires crossing the disciplinary boundaries as well, the engaging social actors at all levels. We have also worked in Finland to get an academic world to take an even more active role in finding new ways towards sustainable transformation. And I'm glad to inform that the establishment of Helsinki Sustainability Science Center is now a response to this cause, and the center will be operating as 2017. So I hope that good cooperation will come. And also for your information, that perhaps next time it could be Helsinki. This is a wonderful place, but it could be also good for there. There are a lot of things what I could tell here, but this is not a monologue, so I think that we can speak everything what interests you, but of course including also what I have said. But Geoffrey is here too, so that's... Okay, Isaac.
Thank you. Thank you very much, not only for this lecture, President Halonen, but also for your long leadership in these issues. You mentioned a number of them which you actually intimated to become a global discussion. I think you were very outspoken in the issue of equality and inequality. Maybe even not outspoken enough so far, seeing the state of the affairs, but that's probably is yet to come. I will come to that later. So thank you very much. I think I am right when I say that many in this room, but also outside, are looking up to you. I've been communicating with some of my governing council members. We have now 24 member counties, as you know, and we are governed by the council, which is, and many of them ask me to not only say regards to you, but also how much I would say appreciate your lifelong mission already, which you have done. So thank you very much for that. I would like to do the two things now. Of course, we will open up for questions. And then after some time, I have a number of summarizing questions, which hopefully will lead to a debate on a number of very key issues, both on the international scene, but also very relevant to YASA. And I'm happy to see some of the leading colleagues here at YASA, program directors. The question will be to the effect of our science agenda. Are we having things right? And do we focus on the right things, given what you said? So that will be the second part of discussion then. So who wants to be first to make a comment or ask a question to Tarja Halonen? Jeff, please. Jeff.
It's wonderful to see you. Thank you very much. And as Pavlo said, thank you for your leadership in this area. I want to ask you about politics and the state of affairs in your country and in my country and the relations that there might be. The Finns party is, I think, if I understand correctly, an example of a largely anti-immigrant party. It's had tremendous success electorally in recent years. We have Donald Trump in the United States with very significant backing, perhaps not majority backing, but very large backing. There are many other related parties all through Europe right now. And Europe, on the whole, seems to be in crisis on these issues. When I think about the Sustainable Development Agenda, I think about the Nordic successes and often say that the SDG agenda is really the social democratic agenda in a way. And yet there's a tremendous unrest, even in very rich, very stable societies. A lot of political divide, and I wonder how you would reflect on this and what its implications are for the kind of cooperation that we need.
I have So I have a part in my lecture where I was describing the situation in Finland, in other Nordic countries, and in Europe. But then I said to my collaborators, I said that perhaps I leave it for the questions. And we have not made an agreement that Jeffrey will do it. I spoke a little bit about the uncertainty, why people feel it like that. And Nordic countries is really a good example, like you said, Jeffrey, that in the past, Nordic citizens, they learned to live in pretty safe society. It doesn't mean that we have not seen the war. During the 100 years of independence Finland has had, after 700 years under the Swedish king and queens, 100 years under the Russian Tsar family. So we have had one civil war and 2 other wars, and we have been the poorest of the Nordic sisters to build this welfare society. But still, according to the international statistics, we have reached a good result. Especially our education system is, according to the PISA valuation, have been during many years the best, and still today one of the leading countries. So why do people say that, that this is no more good? Of course, the wave of the refugees from the southern Europe, from the Middle East, was a shock. I mean, everybody has said them in the newspapers and TV, but it was over when you closed the TV. It was somewhere there. And then suddenly it was in the streets. After the first shock, the Finnish authorities have succeeded pretty well with taking the refugees, but the same phenomenon what has happened here and in many other countries, it has been also like a wave. It started from certain countries and then it spread that they are more and more tight for these decisions which kind of the people can have a right for asylum. We have a very, very strong discussions in the media and in demonstrations, and so that how we can send back a person so we know that they are really risk. That it's not so that if you send somebody back to Baghdad, that if in certain district of the Baghdad is safe, that then you can send him or her and the whole family back. But then I think that all this size of the issue, size of the problem is still something which is very difficult to understand how to do. And of course everybody asks also, or many people ask, that why we cannot stop this violence which caused these refugees? Why we are only taking the people? Why we don't stop it? And at least the generation like Jeffrey and I, we know that obviously when we had tried to stop the violence with power, force, so it also caused some difficulties. And this is a very big issue, but I still come back to the basic reason. We have to find the consensus or the broad front to stop these violences. Don't ask me how to do it. I know the both answers in which way, but I'm still hoping that East and West, North and South could find at least a step-by-step solution for this. The second point is, of course, that the violence, the uncertainty is also imported to Europe and the big cities especially, so that it's more the signal of the inequality than the Middle East violence as such. That it's a question that why those should enjoy all these good things when we are without. Some other things, causes of terrorism, I'm not a very good specialist on that, because this kind of the terrorism is so much more cruel than what it used to be, for instance, in 19th century, when it was against the rulers. And so it's very hard to me to understand that how you can put babies to carry the bombs on, or such kind of things, or say that that the girls can be the sexy slaves or something like that. I mean, I think we have a long way to do this. But then coming back to why this new populism in our countries, it's not always like this. It's just a question that you have tried to work hard, you have give possibilities for your children to become educated, the society has made the same and so on. And then finally these young people are without work. They are well educated, but they have not a decent job. And so if they got a job, perhaps the next job is not at all what they have an education on. And all these kind of things are also something which creates a question that who is guilty for that? And I think it's much more easier to say who is guilty than what's the matters. What's the, I mean, institution, what is the issue, how we can tackle it. And we have here in Europe and also in Austria, we have bad experiences from that if we think that a certain type of the person or a cultural group or anybody is guilty for that. That if we don't see the institutional side. And institutional side is much more time-taking to change. As I sometimes say a little bit cynical way that you can kill the former ruler or the whole government in one night, but you don't build a new democratic system, not even in one generation, it's 2 generations. And that makes so-called easy solutions so attractive, and also the Western countries have been in the same business, that they have been supporting this kind of the shortcut solutions, if I put it that way. But then we come back, what is the institutional change? And you Jeffrey know very well it. So let's do this. We have in Finland the good news, I think that at least my husband would tell always that the good news. We have, after the parliamentary elections, the True Finns party had a popularity. They were the second biggest political group in the parliament. Now it has gone down, and it's only their 4th or something like that. But anyway, they have lost a lot of popularity. So and so it seemed to be so that then after the first shock that we show for those who had the power, they say that it didn't work. I hope that we keep these people interested in politics, in democratic system, that they don't turn to even more outside of the system. And I say that in True Finns party, you have a lot of populists, even some who support racism, but there are also people who have been fed up with the system, and what I would say that they are capable political actors in the future, And in the same way, I say in all countries, don't put the label on all of those who are now in this movement. Let's try to see that what's good and what's not so good. Sorry, long answer, but he's always very skillful to make the very bad question.
Let me, not a bad question at all, as a matter of fact, I think we all feel it. And let me use the opportunity to follow up a little bit before I go to my colleagues here. As you know, yesterday in Albach, where EASA is collaborating, we had an opening session and President Juncker came, among others, and he interacted with us and he gave speech to a similar effect. And he came. I
know him.
He came from holiday actually, and of course we were expecting 1,000 people there to be listening to a very careful speech of the politician who is in a very complicated position. But it was not what it was. Juncker gave hope after 30-minute speech. He gave hope in an unusual way, and you saw people in tears, young people sitting in the front rows. If I ask you the same question.
Oh yeah, situation has been generations back much worse. I mean,
so give us some hope. Give them some hope, please.
Yeah. So I mean that when my mother and father made me, that I was born in the last war Christmas. I was born in last war Christmas in Finland, in the situation where quite many thought that Soviet Union will occupy Finland and terrible winter and everything. And somehow my father and mom they thought that it's only sex they could have a baby. And here I am. We succeeded, and of course it has been difficulties. And if you speak with your grandparents, it will be the same.
Okay. Thank you. Since we are now on this almost personal track of our discussion, you have been big promoter and big fighter for equality, gender equality as well. But in your own personal career, of course, you became head of state for 12 years. And that's, of course,
that was a maximum.
Yeah, yeah.
The Constitution.
So you wanted to be even longer. I know that.
No, I didn't. But it was a good help.
But my question was different. Since we had this opportunity to have your husband here, who is, is a professor, we know him, etc., can we ask him, how did he experience, how did you get through this 12 years of terrible inequality in attention and time and everything? Could you give us some recipe here, because it's important?
You are not the first one who will ask that. I will tell that who was the first one. Years ago, we were in USA, and it was a Scandinavian delegation, the kings and queens, and then we, and then in the discussion, suddenly Bill Clinton made a question to my husband. How do you feel to be a spouse of the president? And he answered, Mr. President, you will survive.
Any comment, please?
Yeah, that was true. I don't know why he asked, and I don't remember why I answered that way. But anyway, I must say that it was interesting days and years when she was president, and I suppose most of the time I was professor in the university, and it was very good job for that, because then the job of professor you can do where you want to, almost where you want to. For instance, one student asked me when I have read her study, and I said that I'm not very sure, but last time I read it in the ballet of the King of Sweden.
Yeah, and so when you have a lot of waiting time, so you can do that. But I will say also, Pavel, to you that you don't know that. Have you noticed that in many cases when the female politicians have the husbands, they are either the journalist, artist, or they are professors who have an asylum at university?
Well, so how do you call this actually? First lady, first man?
Now I can say something what is in Austria very bad. Because we married after 3 months when I have elected to be a president, because the protocol has a terrible headache that how they could call him. But now he was my husband, and
That's you.
he was
Okay.
Professor Arajärvi.
So he's the
or-
first
or what
husband.
else.
That's how it's called right now. So maybe you have some lessons, hopefully, for Bill Clinton. Okay, we just stop discussion on this. Let's go back to serious thing, please.
I think that Bill Clinton will be first gentleman. That's
First gentleman.
But I was called normally professor.
Professor. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you for this intervention. No, I'm not losing you yet. It was just for the, let's go back to the subject of serious discussion here. Who wants to intervene next?
I say this is a serious subject because, young gentlemen, some of you might have the same fate.
That's right.
Not
That's
perhaps that perhaps your wife is not the president, but prime minister, speaker of the parliament, or Lord Mayor, or something else, and then you have to think already that how you keep your identity. But the problem is the same with the modern woman. It's exactly the same with the modern woman, and the spouse of the president of Finland today, the young lady who is his wife. She is also very independent and doing the work at the university with literature. Okay.
Yeah, which is excellent. Thank you. Who wants to be next to say some observations on the subject? Not about husband-wife, but yes, please, Gunther.
I have a brief question following up on what has been asked before, because one reason why the refugee problematic became so difficult is that those countries, I think, that were inclined to help initially found that many others in Europe had too little solidarity to pull the solution off. So are you optimistic? How do you see it in Finland? I mean, Finland being a large physical country, but small in population, Austria being small in all respects, I think many people here tried to help initially, but got frustrated in a way.
Yeah, so I will answer to that you remember, Juncker could be good to speak with, because when the Commission proposed to the EU member countries that they could share the amount of the refugees and to see how to handle this issue, so the member countries were against. But I think that some of them, could be also my own country, were against because they didn't want to give more power for the Commission. It was more the process, the procedural system. But I don't know why they didn't go then further and say that you decide by the summit or somebody else do that. But they didn't do it immediately. But then they have continued now and tried to say that which is the fair part. So in that way, this part has already started and we could done. One question what I would put against to this one is that the enlargement of the European Union happened very rapidly when Soviet Union collapsed and we get the new democracies in the eastern part of Europe. But the 50 years they have passed under the communist rule has been quite difficult for them. And many of these countries and their politicians have adopted so-called victim's role, victim profile. And they have all the time the feeling that they have suffered so much and that's why we cannot ask more. When in the matter of fact, yeah, they have suffered, but many others have also suffered. And so as I used to say to my Baltic friends that European Union is not an holiday place or the hospitality where you can recover from your time of the communist time. That it's a very hard place for the economics and politics, and you will have also your duties. Some of them have taken them, but in some others they have had a very strong reactions concerning everybody, everything which comes outside of their own governments. And I say very openly, somebody from Czechs, Pavel, yeah, and some others, Czechs, for instance, Hungary and Poland, they were one of the best candidates to the EU, really. And every one of them have suffered now a certain type of the contra-reaction for this democratization process. So this is really also the question what the EU should think, that what is such kind of the issues which irritate. And perhaps there is, so even Finland has never accepted the idea, Sweden more, that it will be to two-store EU in a way that those who are more in the core and those who are a little bit less formally in its system. We have an EEA and we still have it, but it could be something which is a little bit between, perhaps. But all the Eastern European countries, they were so hungry to become the members of the EU that the process was not perhaps enough long. But this is one part. If somebody can tell me why UK is not what they have done. So I mean that, of course, they are part of the global imperium, but I think that they need Europe as Europe needs UK.
Yeah.
So these are not easy. I'm just a humble former lawyer.
Well, you're more than that. So let me ask you a question which is typically asked a question. As you know, EASA has been established during the complex times of Cold War. It was a visionary idea of great leaders of this world, which was from the former Soviet Union, Alexei Kosygin, and from the United States, President Johnson and others who helped. It was put together as a bridge with hopefully top-level science from both sides of the bridge, both sides of the river, or wall, maybe even better because we had a wall at that time. And it developed to what it developed over the first 20 years, a very important institutions to do this both function very effectively. Since the relationship between East and West, or if you want, the former US-led camp and the Soviet camp was at the beginning of EASA, because we are very interested about what followed. And you may not know that at this institute, after Mr. Gorbachev got perestroika going in Moscow, there was a lot of things done to help the transformation, at least to inform it. And Jeff was involved in it, and Bill Nordhaus and many others. We are now wondering from the perspective of the geopolitical history, and not only beyond the establishment of EASA, but before, important question which you would like to understand macroeconomically and geopolitically for the future. Why do you believe, as an experienced leader, European, global, but also Finnish, that we have always made such a complex story from the relation between Russia, Soviet Union, and Europe? Where is it sitting really? Knowing by feeling that the macroeconomic construct of the large Eurasia probably is the way to go if you look into the logic of the global geopolitics. So what would be your analysis about how did we, sorry for expression, always so complicated and even more screwed up, always screwed up this relationship, so both sides?
We have studied a lot. We have an Alexander Institute at Helsinki University, which is specialized in Russia issue, and they are very skillful. So for Finns, of course, we understand very well. As I mentioned, we were 700 years a part of Sweden. And when Sweden had a war against Russia, so we were the battlefield. We were that battlefield between Sweden and Russia, that part of Sweden where the battles were going on. So we, in a way, it's a very, very long collective memory that all bad things come from the East. Then I think we succeeded rather well in past years to build again the relations. Even of course, we had a winter war. We had a continuation to that. In the Second World War, we lost even more land what we lost in the winter war. But then little by little we succeeded to build these relations. And funny thing in a way was that when we were in the wrong side in the Second World War, because we were together with Hitler, so we had to pay quite much to the Soviet Union. It was a right choice, because if we would choose like Baltics, so if we would choose between the Stalin and Hitler, if we would choose Stalin, we would be without independence. With Hitler, which was then who also shut down. So we had a better situation. We just paid money, but we had a long trauma that we wanted just to be out of all kind of systems. That we just build our own country. But I think that we know Russians in very pragmatic way. They are our neighbors, and we have had always a lot of trade with them, and so on. And I think that becoming a member of the European Union was for us also the security issue, after all. But now when we are in EU, we were in the beginning, we were the good gateway to Russia, between EU and Russia. But now after this Ukrainian case, when it has been all this system, so we have been one of those who have paid a lot because we are a neighboring country. Well, we are like the Baltic, so Poland and so on. And I think, of course, we don't accept what Russia made in Crimea and Ukraine, but I don't think that people or nations become better if you isolate them. I think that when I was at Harvard, and the Americans always ask me what the Putin thinks, I said, I don't know, but if you discuss with him, you might know. And then keep going with discussion, telling your own opinions and so on. That's the best way. Angela Merkel of Germany made it a long time. I don't know what has happened between them, but now it seems to be much more difficult. But I think that we can try also another way, not only with the leaders. We can do it in what I learned to know Putin. I think that he really wanted that Russia would become a more European country. And many people also don't remember that Russia even signed the Kyoto Protocol. And we succeeded with all these environmental people to convince him. But I think so that we could start from somewhere which is not so political. I'm very happy that in Arctic issues now, both the USA and Russia seem to have to found each other, and EU also, that that could be one edge where you come and start, because then, so it has started also earlier. Yeah. That you start something which is very pragmatic and practical, and then little by little you can find a way. I think that Putin has paid a very, very high price for the Ukrainian issue. But another way around is also that I have worked with Ukrainians a long time, and it's a problem herself. I mean,
I'm asking the question because I'm trying to provoke a statement discussion about, is it perhaps yet another time in history where independent scientific collaboration like JASA could help, and we actually, and we
you and Austria and JASA, yes, and people like Geoffrey and many others. I mean, it's keeping the contacts and trying to find the ways in the smaller scale and then the bigger. And we should always remember, for instance, when I have been in this sexual and reproductive rights and health, so I traveled myself to Russia to speak with the leadership, not in publicity, but tete-a-tete, that you are a European country, that you should do this and this and this, and they did it. Mm-hmm. They stopped their terrible politics in sexual and reproductive rights. I mean that it's not making miracles, but it's trying to help people to identify themselves in the right way.
Thank you. I'm turning now again to you. Jeff Wood, I think there was somebody, and then come back to you. I think it's Gosia. Gosia?
Thank you very much. Gosia Śmieszek, Arctic Futures Initiative Risk and Resilience Program here. First of all, let me thank for the comment about the Arctic as the ground for peaceful cooperation. That's one thing, but the question I had goes a little bit earlier to the discussion when you were talking about sustainable development, and I was thinking, when you mentioned the role of young scientists, I was thinking, could you share with us your reflection on which way do you see for young scientists, for YAUF, in pursuing sustainable development? And here, I mean, do you think it rather goes through our growth to positions of leaders in the current systems as it exists, or is it perhaps more through contesting the current system because of the limitations it has in place? How do you see that role?
you can change the world at all levels. So don't wait until you are the leader. So we spoke on Friday on that everybody has their limits. President Sisser was very strong on that everybody has their limits. I say always the same, that when you are the member of the city council, you have much more power in certain city. When you are the member of parliament, you have in this sector. When you are minister of the government, you might have in one sector of the government, but no more in the parliament or in the city level. And then when you are president, you have even more limitations. It's the same, I dare to say, with the scientists, that your own personal work, when you do it, you can find a new way to see the things. But of course, the network is also important. When you now find the people with whom you know that you can share the ideas, so you should continue and build this network. So easily, especially when I know that you have been now already a longer time in Finland, you might become a Finnish type that you don't answer to the letters, but you should. I mean, it's not enough that you find somebody to work well here, but you have to care your friendship, your collaboration. And that has been also for me sometimes very difficult. But this is, I think, the way, because suddenly you notice that there are more than you and somebody else, that there are more and more. In that way, I'm not romantic, but I think that sometimes the transformation can also start very well even from the bottom level, and scientists are not that, but at all levels, and to see the possibilities up and down, both.
Thank you. Jeff, you wanted to comment on...
I wanted to come back to the Russia issue for a moment, because I wanted to ask your opinion, because it seems to me that Finland holds a key to this problem. And one of the great lessons of Finland was Finland behaved, I think, with great clarity and also a lot of restraint necessarily in its relations with Russia and with Soviet Union, and was able to balance its geographic realities and its independence and its membership in Europe. And Austria has a lot of the similar issues. Yeah. Both countries are not in NATO, and both countries have maintained a good, constructive relationship with Soviet Union and with Russia after 1991. My feeling has been, I just want your reflection on it, that the United States provoked a lot of the problems that we now experience, especially in the move to incorporate Ukraine into NATO, not just into Europe. And also Europe did something which is dangerous, it seems to me, which is ever more tightening the security and the economic side. So more and more being in Europe means being part of the NATO alliance, which was not the original idea. These were two different spheres. And so I've worried since 2008 that the invitation to Ukraine and to Georgia was very provocative to Russia, and this was one of the reasons why the Russian reaction has been so harsh both in Georgia and Ukraine. Don't take away Sevastopol, don't think about our bases, don't think about joining NATO. And of course, in international relations, the security dilemma is very ever-present, which means every reaction leads to a misinterpreted counter-reaction. So the more Russia responds, the more we say, well, that's all the reason now Ukraine must become a member. And then you have countries like Poland, very aggressive, very anti-Russian, understandable from the history, but also leading to more and more tension when it's clear 10 years ago that was not the path we were on, or 15 years ago. Putin was not an anti-European, not a madman, not any of the things that we read about every day, that he's crazy, he's provocative, he's warlike. And so I wonder on how do we unwind this? And leading question, doesn't Finland show the way to unwind this?
I can say that President Niinistö, who is now the president of Finland, he has tried to keep the channel to discuss with President Putin, and he has tried to do it in a way that he's both respecting the EU and then the Russia, but it has not been always easy times to do that. I can tell it. When I was 12 years a president, that was more the sunny period of the relations between Russia and the EU. Even we have Chechnya and we have many other these difficulties, what easily people forget afterwards. But my sincere picture also from Putin was that he wanted to become a leader of the European country like Tchaikovsky, Dostoevsky, Gogol, and all these, I mean, famous names of the Russian culture, that he wanted to be behaved with respect. Then, of course, something what Russia never has had is a rule of law, Rechtsstaat. No, never. They used to have in the 19th century. They were not too developed. We were part of Russia in that time, and then during the Soviet period, they didn't pay too much importance for the Rechtsstaat ideology, and now, if we think that Germany, Angela Merkel, and the others have difficulties to unite two German units to one, with all this long historical perspective. So how could we think that the Russians could make a miracle in very short time and to make the Rechtsstaat, the rule of law? But politics they have had always, and they still have. I mean, there is no limit that how big majority you could have in parliament, or you have the governments and so on. Corruption is a big bad issue in Russia also, but I think that EU has managed to work with the countries with even worse corruption and with less rule of law and with less this kind of the virtues what we want the countries have. So in that way, I agree that it is really the reason for thinking that why we succeed to do these problems. And I have been criticized in Finland when I once used, concerning my good Baltic experience, I used this description. I said that I understand there be feelings concerning the Russians, that it's like a wife after the divorce from the violent marriage, that they always say that you know what kind he is. And that's true. Many former husbands has killed their former wives and so on. That's true. But in the matter of fact, we have taken the former communist countries to EU. They are also in NATO. We have done all these kinds. So we should say that just now, sit down and think. You have now the new life, let's do that, and don't spoil all the life of your own children also in this way that you are all the time shaking that what will happen. I mean that Ukraine was bad thing, Georgia was bad thing. It has happened also many other things, but I think that for the more sustainable development, we should build something which is common and not to make the frontier. We have the long history in Finland to be the last in the right line. So we were the most eastern of the Western countries. And Austrians have a little bit the same experience. It's not nice if you have only half of the world. It should be better to go in different sides, but this could be perhaps a good idea also, that when you are respected organization and when you know also the good and bad sides, and you are honest but not innocent.
Thank you.
So I think that this could be the ideas how to go further, especially when in sustainable development we need everybody. We cannot, and for instance, we can speak later on in Albach or here. I have a lot of experience how we have made an environmental protection for Baltic Sea, where, of course, Russia is part of that. We succeeded to push them to clean the wastewaters of St. Petersburg, which has already now the very positive impact in Baltic Sea. And such kind of issues which are so-called non-political, but come to learn to people.
Thank you, President, for what I would call this geopolitical wisdom, which you are now showing here. And I know this is shared also by Jeff and others. I was actually, let discussion go, trying to come back to very fundamental question, which I would like to discuss at the end of this fantastic debate. I was privileged to sit in the second row of the General Assembly last year when these fantastic commitments were made one by one after the Pope Franciscus spoke, and then everybody came, and we had this 193, Jeff, right? 93 yes, and yes, and yes, and yes.
The big wedding.
A big one. And the party was great, and actually it was fantastic because Jeff organized this fantastic concert, and Jim Kim became Big Bird and everything. But then you realize there are a couple of things which were never said. Nobody spoke about what are the risks to this agenda. What about geopolitical complexities of the kind we talk about, not only in Europe but everywhere? I mean, how do we marry those two things? On one hand, complex geopolitics, which is becoming worse and worse. On the other hand, all these fantastic agendas which we have to implement, not knowing how. So my question is actually first, do you believe that we missed on something? Did we hide important part of it in the commitment sense? And I will come to my second question, which is going about science agenda. So how can we close our eyes in adopting all these fantastic things, both in Paris and New York, knowing that there is a complexity underlying this, which we need to solve probably first? I call it geopolitical infrastructure.
Perhaps we believe that, I used on Friday the wording, the long march of the Mao, that perhaps we thought that making the journey together, we learn also. Because if we don't start the journey, we cannot solve the problems sitting in the laboratory, that we have to do at the same time the practical work. But we have done all this even knowing that perhaps not everything, perhaps we have not even done all correct, right questions. Perhaps we will learn something. And when I mentioned this decent work for you after the MDGs, I think that was a very fine, honest way for United Nations and member countries to say that, oh, we have forgotten something very important, and we put it. And that's why I think that the implementation is now very, very important, that we take it in the brave but humble way that when we have these systems to review and to see how it has worked, that we really are honest and said, aha, is that correct or not, and how to do it. But also to remember that every citizen, every generation has the right for a certain amount of the happiness, that we don't make such kind of the mistake that we say that once it will be a paradise, but to say that we try to do every day it's better. I think that for me, one of the very big issues is in this whole process is that, yes, I'm guilty. I have been with the others also to say that we need this trinity, this modern trinity. I have said and I have demanded that not only the governments, but the parliaments and the private sector and NGOs and academia will be. But then if somebody asks me that, how do you think that they will make decisions together? How do you like to implement them together? So I said, yeah, this is quite a challenge. Because we know always that already from these processes where we have been within, that more that they have been transparent and inclusive and all that, the more difficult they were. If I compared what happened with MDGs and even with this ILO's decent work, this World Commission, and then with Rio Plus 20. So the Rio Plus 20 was a terrible process. I mean, it was so transparent, so inclusive that we have thousands and thousands and thousands of proposals and people, and we try to handle them. And many of them were concentrated just in their own idea, not the whole picture. And so we have to find that in which way to do it, and knowing also that the governments didn't like this or that, and so. Yeah. And so in that way, you know that the others have also heard once already on Friday, that I call that it's not the power pyramid. It's not the power pyramid like it has been in democratic state. It's more like an ecoplasma. It's just that you have different kind of the actors working there, and then you should find a way how you move them to the right direction to get the critical mass to make this new transformation.
Yeah.
And don't ask me how to do that, but I will be with you trying to do that. And that's why I said already earlier that don't wait before you are a leader. To do it when you're at your level already now, because then you learn how to do it. Because you have already, well, you are doing now in Arctic issues, you have a lot of different kind of actors. So try to do it there. It can be a good example for the next step, as we did also in the Baltic Sea system. And in that way, you cannot change the world like that. But you can start to make pieces, and then we need a persons like you and Geoffrey and my own husband and many others of you who are sewing together it. That's why it's network. If I finish this saying that in the days when I was a younger politician, always somebody wrote a speech where they said, we are forging these decisions to this and that. So why forging? Why not knitting?
Right.
Because that's that already now the different way of thinking that we say network and we can do knitting it. It's not only feminine, masculine. It means that it's more flexible, it's more elastic, and you can change it in different way.
I must confess that your statement Friday, and I've discussed it, to define the whole system as the ecoplasma had a lot of resonance, and I mean, I think we liked it very much. Actually, you might find it back in some of the EASA agendas in the future, so we will we'll give you all the credit.
Veikko, you can stand up. Veikko is my diplomatic advisor. He knows we have so many times tried to draw it. I wanted when I was young to become a painter, an artist.
It's much better than ecosystem.
And we have tried to see how it
much better than ecosystem. It gives all the complexity kind of in a dynamic way. So we like it.
And you can do it with a computer now because it's more sculpting than painting. That you could see that how it. Now I. Let
me go to the last question. Within this ecoplasma, which has everything together, it's interconnected and it's fluid and it's never static. I understand that. This institute has been good in many things, as you know, and we have been substantiating a lot of the international agreements and treaties on climate, etc., etc. For example, on the last IPCC report, EASA had 21 lead authors and contributors to everything, so it's a big contribution. We are producing quite often high-level scientific papers. We are coming to the concrete numbers, for example, about energy transformations. We are calculating all the cost-benefit. We do calculate when exactly the particular CO2 level atmosphere should be drawn down because of objectives. And we do more and more of that. Many discussions we are having also in our retreats, but also outside, go to the direction of does this all really going to be the main mover behind the change? I mean, more and more facts, more and more numbers behind how much CO2 should be drawn down from the atmosphere. Knowing that the governance, institutions, democratic systems or not, cognitive aspects, behavior aspects, probably do matter as much as the first knowledge. So, if you would be the one giving to EASA for next 10 years, well, let's be 200 million euro. What kind of tech would come with it? What kind of research would you ask us to do for this money for next 10 years?
I have already answered. I think that the behavior is very important. And to come back, when we speak about education, go back to children. Like my husband, we have 5 grandchildren. And so again and again, when you see the baby wants to learn to speak, and especially when he or she wants to learn to walk, you know what happens. It's step by step training the muscles and all that. It's like an intensive training program. And then finally, the child is so involved in this system that the father and mother have to try to push him or her to sleep, because they are doing, even when they are going to sleep, they are moving and trying to do that. And such kind of the enthusiasm to learn the new things and the patience to learn it, to train it. Why we lose it? Why don't we do the same? when we were and our children and grandchildren are 5 years old, they make all the time impossible questions. And then finally, a normal father or mother will say that, stop for a while. Mommy has to do something else now. And as one of our children said that, are the trees doing the wind? We were laughing, but nowadays the scientists say that in a way she's all right, okay, that and the trees are one part of this, how the winds are coming, because it's it's a much broader ecosystem than just the winds. And so I think that we should come back to the children. And it's not only this, that how to keep the curiosity and learning to do, but also we have some of the very good people who have done this. And this is a teaching how to solve the conflicts. So to see that whether it could be possible to teach children to solve the disputes they have in more cooperative, more peaceful way, because you know that the children are not at all so nice always to each other, but teach them to think that how to live together when you have really different kind of interests. And preschool education in that way is very, very important to understand. That everybody can get more that if they can also understand each other. And I think that you are right, but we should do it. We should try to make even better generation. And also to believe that fathers and mothers can learn also new things, and even grandmothers and grandfathers. So don't think that it's only the new generation. We can learn from children how to do and to do this. But the second point is that adult education, we have to believe that when we live longer, that we learn all the time more. And I think this would be the project.
Madam President, this was very ecoplasmatic, very moving, and above all, very human final word. So thank you very, very much. And join me, please.